In medieval Europe, fire was not a convenience. It was, survival, authority and continuity. A household without fire was vulnerable to cold, darkness, spoiled food, and, loss of morale. Yet medieval people lived in a world without matches, lighters, or even dry indoor kitchens when out on campaign. Rain, fog and damp ground were constant enemies. Out of this reality came a fire-making system so reliable that it functioned even in driving rain. The use of specific firestones paired with iron and carefully prepared tinder. This was not luck or folklore. It was controlled chemistry practiced daily for centuries. Why medieval firemaking had to work in wet conditions. Medieval life did not pause for bad weather. Armies marched in rain. Shepherds slept outdoors. Traders crossed rivers and forests for weeks at a time. Fire tools, therefore, had to perform when wood was soaked, clothing was damp, and hands were cold. The medieval solution did not rely on friction or dry air. It relied on sparks hot enough to ignore moisture entirely. Now, let's talk about what medieval firestones actually were. The primary firestone, you see, was flint, which is a hard form of microcrystalline quartz. Flint itself doesn't burn. Instead, when you strike it sharply against high-carbon steel, it actually shears off these tiny, microscopic steel particles. Those little particles ignite instantly due to friction, and they reach temperatures above 1,500 degrees Celsius. Even rain, honestly, can't extinguish a spark that hot before it lands. In earlier and, parallel traditions, iron pyrite was also used. Pyrite, which folks often called fool's gold, produces sparks when struck against steel or stone. Unlike flint, pyrite actually contributes burning material itself. Even when damp, pyrite can spark because, the reaction happens right at the point of impact, not out in the air. Why rain could not stop this system? Rain interferes with flame, not sparks. Medieval fire-making, you see, focused on producing sparks first and then transferring them to prepared tinder that could ignite even when ambient conditions were, quite poor. The spark existed for just a fraction of a second, but its temperature was so high that water droplets had honestly no meaningful effect. So, this is the key difference between medieval firestones and friction methods like bow drills. You see, friction really depends on dryness and, sustained heat build-up. Flint and steel, on the other hand, bypass those limitations entirely. Now, here's the thing, how medieval tinder made wet fire possible. Firestones alone were honestly useless without proper tinder. So, medieval folks, they used all sorts of things for tinder, like char cloth, fungus, such as amadou, and, processed plant fibres. Char cloth, which was made by heating linen or cotton in low oxygen, would ignite at extremely low temperatures, you know. Sometimes just one spark was enough. Amadou, which they harvested from birch polypore fungus, was beaten, boiled, and treated to create a sort of felt-like material that accepted sparks really well. It could be carried under clothing, keeping it dry even in rain. This preparation was as important as the stone itself. How the fire-starting process actually worked. The process was deliberate and fast. The firestone was held steady. The steel striker was snapped downward, shaving sparks onto the tinder held close but not blocking airflow. Once the tinder glowed, it was folded into dry plant material such as straw or shredded bark. Gentle breath turned glow into flame. Rain mattered little, because the ignition happened instantly, and the flame was protected during its weakest stage. Now, you see, medieval travellers trusted this system absolutely. Fire kits were personal items, you know. Many people carried them daily, much like we carry our keys today. Losing a firestone was, well, a serious problem. Archaeological finds show flint strikers buried with the dead, which really indicates just how important they were. Medieval records describe fires being lit on riverbanks, in forests after storms, and, during winter campaigns. The system was not just theoretical, it was used constantly. Now, let's talk about how modern users can actually apply this knowledge today. You see, this method, it really does remain relevant for modern survivalists. A flint and steel kit will still function when lighters fail and matches, well, soak through. The steps honestly remain the same. Always carry flint or chert, a carbon steel striker, and either real char cloth or, you know, some properly processed fungus. Store your tinder close to the body, that's important. And, practice controlled strikes rather than just wild sparks. Modern ferrocerium rods, you know, are really descendants of this old technology. But, well, traditional flint and steel, they teach you control, patience, and, honestly, a kind of reliability that's hard to beat, especially under poor conditions. Why did medieval firestones, outperform later technologies? Matches, they certainly revolutionized convenience, but they sort of sacrificed durability along the way. Early matches, well, they just failed in damp conditions, didn't they? Flint and steel, you see, never actually stopped working. As long as the stone stayed hard and the steel was carbon-rich, sparks were, well, always guaranteed. This is why, you know, flint fire making persisted well into the 19th century, despite newer options. Reliability, in the end, mattered more than speed. So, why does this knowledge still matter, you might ask? Well, understanding medieval firestones is, in a way, understanding how people engineered certainty into an uncertain world. They didn't exactly fight nature head-on. Instead, they worked around its limits, you know. Rain could soak wood, soil, and clothing, but it couldn't stop a spark that burned hotter than molten metal. That quiet confidence, that's precisely why this system endured for centuries, and why, honestly, it still deserves our respect today. If this deep exploration of medieval survival technology added real value to your understanding of practical history, do consider supporting Backyard Wisdom by subscribing, sharing this episode, and helping keep proven knowledge alive for those who value skill over convenience.